We're back here, the whole 9 yards on a Tuesday afternoon. Brandon, how's it going? It's been like 5 days since we recorded.
Yeah, what was it Thursday
Yeah.
that we last recorded? So yeah, and that was the last day we were at school. So obviously we were back now at home. So yeah, it'll be like this for the next 3 months,
3 months.
right?
If you noticed, well, I want to say since like the last time we weren't in school, like last summer or whatever, or during Christmas break, my walls were orange. They're not orange anymore just because orange is probably horrible, but it's blue walls now. Background looks a little bit better, I guess. But I mean, yeah, we'll just get into it. We got a couple things, NBA reaction type of things. First thing, 2020 draft. The ringer, Kevin to Jarks. He graded the.
Jonathan
What
Jars.
did I say, Kevin?
Yeah.
Jonathan to Jarks. Yeah, I mean, do you want to just get right into it, or?
Yeah, we'll do the first 10 picks. And he gave a grade. I guess we'll give our own grade, and then obviously we'll just talk about, that player's rookie season so far.
I mean, Anthony Edwards first. He gives it an A. I think at the time you would give it an A just because he was the consensus number one guy, I feel like. And so it's tough to not give that an A, like when you're writing an article grading the draft. But looking back on it, I mean, I think I'd probably give it an A minus. I think he's probably been the second best rookie. And I think LaMelo's probably been the best. Now, I think Anthony's played more games than LaMelo, so who knows on the rookie of the year race? I mean, it's probably going to be Edwards. I want to say it's going to be Edwards, but LaMelo has definitely been the best rookie. So it's tough for me to give it an A. I'd probably give it an A minus.
Yeah, um I'd probably give it A minus also. I think at the time it definitely was the right pick. I mean, if you're gonna go, LaMelo there, I think when the draft was happening, there was a lot of questions with LaMelo. It wasn't, if you were to go back right now, obviously you take LaMelo first, but at that time he, was playing in Australia and the shooting wasn't there and he kind of wasn't really playing team basketball. And now you can clearly see that he is. But even still, I think Edwards would have been the second pick if you were to redo it right now. And for that team, again, we'll see what happens with that team. I don't really love that team going forward, but I think that definitely was the pick. He's exciting. I think he's been a really, good rookie so far. And, since the All-Star break, he's averaging close to 24 points per game, on 35% from three and 45% from the field. So that's pretty encouraging considering before the All-Star break, he really wasn't shooting that well. He also wasn't playing that much. He's obviously been playing more since the All-Star break. And since then, he's been really good. He's been more efficient than you probably would think that he is. He's not a great shooter. So for him to be shooting 35%, if he could do that for his career, 33 to 36%, I think that's pretty good from him. So I don't think he's that good of a shooter, and I don't think he's that efficient. But since the All-Star break, he's been pretty efficient. And yeah, he's a guy who can score. So I'd probably give it an A minus too.
Second pick, Warriors. They picked Wiseman. Tajarks gave it a B. I think it's around a B still. I think positionally it was a need for the Warriors, and they clearly didn't really need a point guard, or they didn't really need a shooting guard. So they needed a big man. I think bringing in Wiseman made sense. Has he been the second best player in the draft class so far? Definitely not, but he's still been a top five guy, probably top six guy. Uh, Names you'd rather have than him? I mean, you'd rather have Edwards. He wasn't there. You'd rather have LaMelo. Rather have Quickly, and there's probably other guys too you'd rather have that I can't think of right now. But yeah, I think Halliburton probably before the injury. I'd probably give it a B plus. I think positionally it made sense. I don't know that it was the best pick at the time, but I think B plus makes sense.
Yeah, I'd probably go B, like he had in his initial grade. I think they definitely position need. They could have went Lamelo, but it would have been a weird fit. I just don't think it would have worked, especially with the team how it is this year and how they've played so far. I mean, obviously it's just Steph's team, so I don't really know if Lamelo would have fit into that. So I think fit wise, I think he was definitely the pick. And he obviously was out for the year. I think it was probably a couple weeks ago at this point now that he had the leg injuries, or it was the wrist injury. I forget which one it was. there. He's out for the season, so he didn't play much this year. He definitely was injured at times, and even when he was playing, he was kind of in and out of the rotation. But I think he's someone who only played 3 games in college basketball. Really hasn't played in like close to 2 years because again he was injured for a lot of this year, then only played 3 games last season. So I think this next year and the year after that, I think you'll see him just improve. I don't think he's ever going to be like Edwards or LaMelo, where there's probably going to be a 20 point per game scorer or be like a real true like X factor on a team. I think he'll be a really good, role guy, probably, just a really good center, a guy who can play defense. He clearly has the defensive skills and he could shoot from the outside a little bit. So I think he'll improve over time. But for this season so far, I'd probably say B. Again, there's not much to go off of because he's been injured, but I think he definitely can improve in the future.
LaMelo, 3 to the Hornets. He gave it an A. I'll give it an A plus. He's been the best player of the draft, and getting him at 3. I mean, you really just can't do much better than that. So there's just not much to be said. LaMelo's a guy that, and now he's a guy that I can look at and say, yeah, he could be a first team all pro guy. And if, down the line, he could be, the best or a top 3 point guard in the league. He's going to be that type of guy if injuries don't hurt him and he doesn't get his ego out of control and he's able to still put the work in. He could still develop. He's not perfect, but he's showed the most promise out of any of these rookies by far. So
Yeah, I would say A plus too. I mean, it again at the time of the draft. I mean, there were a lot of questions of he may even fall out of the top 3. People were saying, but it definitely makes the most sense. And, he wasn't playing earlier in this season. They just kind of weren't playing it behind Rozier and Graham. But then Graham got injured, and then LaMelo started playing, and then he's been basically the starter ever since. And he did break his wrist, but he's back now. So if he didn't get injured, he would have clearly been the rookie of the year. But even still, with him being injured, it's a really good rookie season. And yeah, he's going to be. We'll see how he is in the coming years, but at least for this season, yeah, it was a great pick, and it's most likely going to be a great pick. But we'll see if he could be a true like superstar, or if he'll just be a really good all star. We'll see. But he's definitely a really good pick. Yeah.
Patrick Williams to the Bulls. He gave it a B. Definitely a reach at the time, not a huge reach, but a little bit of a shocking pick. He was a guy that rose up draft boards. I'll give you the first grade if you want to take it.
Yeah, I would say probably, I guess he gave him a B. I guess I'd probably go B, maybe B minus, only because, he definitely was a guy like you were saying, he definitely rose late in the draft, based off his kind of measurables and everything like that. And obviously at Florida State, he was a 6 man. He didn't even start. That's kind of what he is with the Bulls. And he does play 28 minutes a game, but only 9 points a game. He can shoot the 38% from 3, which is good. That's something you definitely want out of someone like him. He's not going to be a guy who's going to handle the ball and give you 20 points. He's probably at his peak going to give you possibly 15. But again, it's going to be kind of like a Mikal Bridges type. Not the same position, but kind of athletic, can definitely play defense, can shoot from the outside. That's what you'd hope. Like what happened with Bridges this season, where he's been, a guy who's going to cash in free agency when he gets there. So I think that's kind of the expectation for him, or at least it should be. So if he can turn into that, I think it's a solid pick. But again, at 4, you're definitely looking for someone who could be, your co-star. And I don't think he's that. I think he's just he's going to be a really good role player, I think, for your team. But yeah, I'd probably say B minus.
I'd probably give him a C plus, maybe B minus. The only reason I hold him back from a better grade is because, yeah, I mean, he's going to be a great role player. He's a guy that can hit the 3. He's going to be pretty efficient. He seems consistent so far. I mean, I don't think he's missed a single game. So yeah, that shouldn't be a problem. His attitude's not a problem, but he's at number 4. That's, I don't know that you love taking a guy like that at 4, especially if you're a team like the Bulls. If you're a team like the Warriors, and just to say, you needed that type of player, a team that you're ready to compete with, a guy like Curry and Thompson before Thompson got injured, like, yeah, I mean, that makes a lot more sense. But like Mikal Bridges was 10th, I want to say, to the Suns. So, picking Williams 4th, that's a bit of a reach. And to me, they're players to me that I'd rather have than Williams. And definitely in the lottery. I mean, I guess Halliburton's definitely one of them. He's been good, but again, like at 4, it's tough. If you got somebody like Patrick Williams at 12, like you got Halliburton at, or 10, yeah, I mean, I'd love that pick. Who'd they go with 10? They picked Jalen Smith at 10. Like if you had gotten it, like, or the Suns of it, like if you could get like him at 10, like they got Bridges a couple years ago. Like, yeah, I'd like it. I just the Bulls don't really need that. They're
Yeah,
not
Patrick Williams was the perfect fit for a team that needed a fit like that, like a Warriors team. You know, if they had Clay, obviously, you know, a team that would have been towards the top of the West, like a team you put him in and he's just going to do what his role. He's going to do that. He doesn't need the ball to score. He can play defense and can shoot from the outside when he's given the ball. So that'd be the perfect team for him to go to. I don't know if Chicago exactly was that. I think that they can be that someday, which I don't think they can be. Obviously, they didn't have Vucevic at the time, but they've been probably worse with Vucevic since they traded for him. So, yeah, I think he's a good player. I think he just was the wrong fit for that team. So, I mean, you can't really blame that on him. That's kind of just what happens sometimes. And I think that's what happens with this next pick, which is Isaac Okoro, who went fifth to the Cavaliers. He gave it a C grade. I would I would probably give it now. I'd probably give it a C plus B minus, but I really don't blame it on Okoro as a player. I blame it on the team. I just think he went to the wrong team. He's a guy who isn't going to score in his career. He's never going to score. That's just not what he is. He's not a ball handler and he's not a shooter. He's only shooting 30% from three this year. I think he's averaging 9 points too. And on a team with Garland and Sexton, I mean, you know, you're not going to shoot the ball. I mean, those guys shoot the ball almost every single time down the floor. So that's one thing that, you know, if this was a team that was a playoff team and needed that one more piece, a guy who could play really good defense, which is what he does and gives them length, I think that'd be a great fit. But that's not the team that they were. So I like him as a player, and I wish he would have went to a different team, but he didn't. So I do have to go C plus just because of the fit.
Yeah, I'll give it a C, like Tajarks gave it. He's similar to Patrick Williams, probably better defensively, maybe. He's shooting 29.9% from three, though, on 3 attempts a game. Like, you just can't have that from really anybody at this point in the NBA. Like, that's just not good. I'm assuming he'll improve on it. He's not been efficient. I mean, he's shooting 42% on 8 attempts a game in general. I assume he improves it. I think he'll be a good player. I think he'll be a good role player. He might be able to start on a really good team or be off the bench on another also really good team. But yeah, I just, it's not what the Cavs needed at all. I would much rather take, obviously LaMelo wasn't fair, but a guy like LaMelo, just a boomer bust type of guy, like, because that's kind of what you need as the Cavs, or else, what are you competing for? Maybe the 8 seed, like when they got off their hot start at the beginning of the year, like even if they had kept that, I mean, what, you're gonna get the 8 seed or something and then lose in the first round? That's what a core helps you to get, maybe, and I don't think that's the right fit.
Yeah, totally. The sixth pick, Onyeka Okongwu out of USC, went to Atlanta. He gave it a C. I probably agree with that, maybe even C minus. I didn't really like this pick from the start. It was a pick. You already had Clint Capella, who is the same exact player who Onyeka Okongwu is, and he's obviously way more experienced and definitely better. He's also taller, which also helps. So I didn't really understand this pick. I think maybe some of it was that they knew John Collins is rather going to leave in free agency or they were going to trade him. But again, he doesn't fit that role in John Collins. John Collins is the guy who could score. I mean, he's basically going to give you 20 points every single night, and he's pretty efficient too. That's not what Onyeka Okongwu is. He's not a scorer. He's kind of a rebounder defense guy. And again, he's smaller than Capella, so it just didn't make sense for this team. I just really didn't like this pick at all. I thought, they could have traded out. They could have just taken someone else, whatever they could have done. I just don't think this was a good pick. So I go C minus. I really didn't like the pick.
I didn't like the pick either. I mean, yeah, definitely. You already traded for Clint. Collins is already there now. Yeah, Collins might leave. Who knows? I don't really know, but he hasn't been good either. I mean, he hasn't been particularly exciting. He's coming off the bench basically, I want to say, like almost every game this year.
Yeah.
Per 36 numbers are not great. I mean, he's a per 36, like 12 points, 10 rebounds basically, which isn't bad. But again, like if he was starting in a 36-ish minute role type of, if he was in that role for the Atlanta Hawks right now, I don't believe he'd be anything insane. I just, he looks like a little bit, not a bust. I mean, it's hard, there's a lot of busts in the NBA draft once you get past, the first pick basically. So I don't know if it's like a bust, but 6'8" center who hasn't been flashy, it's a tough sell. So I'd give it like a D, probably, maybe C minus.
Yeah, I think I'm probably too nice at C minus. It could probably be a D plus, honestly. And I don't really see it turning around in the future. I mean, Capella looks like he's going to be there. He's having a really good season this season. And again, you could on NBA rosters in today's game, you could really only have one guy like that, a guy who can't shoot and can really only defend and rebound. So to have two guys like that, especially spending a top 6 pick on that guy, that's a tough sell, especially for a team like the Hawks, which have overachieved this season and they have so much offense. Imagine they added another guy who could score, at least be like a Patrick Williams type guy, someone who could defend on the perimeter and it can shoot the three. That'd make their team even way better than it is right now. So definitely a bad pick by them. But moving on to 7, the Pistons, they took Killian Hayes. He gave it an A on his grade. I I guess right now you'd have to give it probably like a B minus, maybe even C plus. I think at the time it probably was closer to A. I think for a lot of people, and he was a guy who was unknown, from France. Even though he's from America, he did play in France, but I think the upside was there. He did get injured very early in the season. I think it was his hip. And I think he's come back recently, but he's only averaging 6 points. He's playing 24 and a half minutes per game. That's also just a terrible team. Also, I mean, Jeremy Grant's averaging like 24 points per game. That's when you know your team's not good. But he's not shooting the three well, and he wasn't a great shooter, coming into the draft. But you would expect something better. I think he's only 29% right now. But right now, that pick's not looking like a good pick. You were hoping that it was rather him or Halliburton, and clearly Halliburton was the pick. I think they were trying to go with Killian Hayes, thinking that upside of him being a possible 20 plus point per game scorer. But right now, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. And knowing Detroit and their draft picks, it doesn't seem like it's going to happen. So I'd say what I say C minus, what I say C plus, whatever I said. So
I'm gonna go with a B right now, and that's probably really nice. But to me, I don't think Detroit. Yeah, I think the only other option for me, realistically, looking at the rest of the draft board, it would be Halliburton. You definitely should have picked Halliburton as of right now. But when you look at Obi Toppin, who got picked after of Diha, I probably wouldn't have gone of Diha. Jalen Smith definitely wouldn't have gone him. Vassell, not the right fit. Kyra Lewis, not the right fit. Aaron Neesmith, no. Like, what I like about this pick was it was very boomer bust. I mean, this guy had clear upside. He's not much known about him. So I liked the pick at the time. I still don't hate it. I don't know if he actually works out or not. He's only played 23 games or something like that. And he's been not efficient. He hasn't been particularly great, but I mean, if you're the Pistons, you kind of need to, take some shots like that, because if what's the point in picking Obi Toppin if you're the Pistons? There's just no point. Like, he's just a waste of a pick. So I'll give it a B. It's going to go down probably, but at least that gives me some room. If it works out, I mean, it works out. If not, I guess it doesn't. It's tough for me to grade it lower, because the only other person you really realistically could have taken that I would have liked more than Hayes, even right now, is probably Halliburton.
yeah, and I do agree with you. I mean, if you're Detroit, you have to take a risk like that because you're not going to get anyone in free agency. They always try to trade for people, but it never really seems to work out, honestly. So you have to take a risk on a guy like that where you hope that he could turn into at least an all-star type player. That's really just all they need right now, is to at least get an all-star player. And right now, it doesn't look like it's going to work out. But again, looking down the last, the picks after him, it probably was the best pick, except for Halliburton, obviously, where you could have taken him. But I guess moving on to the next pick at 8, the Knicks took Obi Toppin. He gave it a C, and I'd probably say it's a D plus right now. He doesn't even really play, honestly. He only averages 11 minutes per game, hasn't started one game so far this season. And I think they thought, and I think most people thought that, the year that Randall had last year, it was a terrible year. No matter what the stats say, he just played terrible. And I think people thought that he'd rather get traded this year, or, after the season, he just get traded in the offseason. And obviously that just hasn't happened. He's going to make an all NBA team, whether it's second or third team, probably third team, but he'll make an all NBA team. Looks like he's probably going to be there for maybe a couple more years. He may try and extend them or whatever. So that totally worked out for them on that part, but the Obi Toppin part hasn't, because I think they were expecting him to play, because Randall was his minutes were gonna decrease. They were gonna be a really bad team. Toppin was gonna play, maybe do more scoring, have more of the ball, but obviously that just hasn't happened. So whether it's his fault, whether it's just Randall just being a lot better than people expected. Maybe it's Thibodeau. Maybe he was never even going to play Toppin to begin with. I don't even know. But it just hasn't worked out, and I really don't think it's going to work out. So yeah, like I said, D plus. I just don't think it was a good pick.
Yeah, I'll give it a C minus. He just hasn't been very good. He's only 11 minutes a game right now, 4 points a game. I mean, I guess he's efficient if you want to call 48% efficient, but it's on 3 attempts a game. So like, meh, I mean, it doesn't matter. It's just not, it just wasn't the right pick just because, I mean, yeah, Randall's working out and, that's a blame on the front office. You shouldn't be picking a guy that, you shouldn't be picking a replacement for the guy who ends up being your best player on your team and an all-star. The pick's not good. And I didn't like Obi Toppin at the time. A 23-year-old guy coming out of the draft. I don't want a 23-year-old rookie. Maybe if you need a guy like him and you're ready to compete, like maybe, but to me, the upside just wasn't like there with a guy I'd like to have a high in the draft. So it's tough. And the Knicks, yeah, they just didn't need that type of guy. So there were clearly better guys. I mean, I'll say Halliburton again, even have D-High, probably you could argue taking over definitely. So I don't know. Not a good pick.
And again, no one really saw them. No, I mean, no one saw them being this good. I mean, they're the 4 seed right now or 5 seed, depending. But no one saw him being that good. No one saw Randall being this good. So I guess I can, if you go back to when the draft was, it was November. You could definitely look back. I mean, at that point, you could say like, all right, this pick isn't terrible. He may not be the guy that everyone's expecting he could be, but he's going to have a big role in this offense this season, at least next season when Randall most likely would have been gone at the minimum. So just for that not to happen, I think it just screwed that pick up and him, his playing. So again, I can't really fault him for that. I think it was just, a result of what happened with the team. But again, they also could have taken the next pick. The Washington Wizards at 9 took Denny Avdija. He gave it a B on his grade. I would probably give it. I'd probably give it a B minus. I'd probably say B minus. I think he's someone who the situation that he went into at the time of the draft, they only had Bradley Beal, but after the draft they got Russell Westbrook. So going onto a team like that, you're not expecting him to be, some 15-point per game scorer, be like a top rookie in the league. You're just not going to have the ball. You're not going to be shooting enough shots in order to do that. So for his role on the team, it was more of a 3-and-D guy and a spot up shooter. And he definitely needs to improve his jumper. That was one thing coming out of the draft that he needed to do anyways. He only shot 31.5% from 3 on 3 attempts per game. That's going to have to be better on a team like this where you have 2 primary ball handlers who could easily put up 30, 40 points per game. And he did break his leg, I think 2-3 weeks ago, maybe even a month ago at this point now. That did end his season, but I don't think it was a bad season. I think it was an okay season for the circumstance that he's in on a team like this. So I think going into next year, I think you definitely have to have a lot of upside for him in being a better defender and being a better spot up shooter. And obviously Westbrook's not going to be there for, in the next 2-3 years, he's not going to be there. Beal looks like he's probably going to stay there, but at some point, even if he does, he'll probably get traded. So hoping he can become that guy like he was in Israel where, he had the ball, he was scoring, he was making plays. He's a really good playmaker. So I think over the next couple of years, you'll see that pick turn out. But again, for right now, I think B minus is a fair grade for him.
I'll give him a B. I mean, his numbers haven't been spectacular. He just isn't a fit on the team right now. They could use like a 3-and-D guy. Avdija is just, I don't really think he's that. His jumper's not been great. His per 36 minutes, I mean, numbers are garbage. He's not attempting many shots. He hasn't been particularly efficient from 3 either. I just don't think he's a fit on the team right now. But Avdija was a guy who was rumored to go at 4, as high as 4. So I think he slid down, and the Washington Wizards just took best player available, highest ceiling, highest potential there. And I don't think that's a horrible pick. Now, you would have rather had Halliburton. You definitely would have rather had like a Quickly, but I mean, again, like Quickly wasn't going at 9, so really the only realistic possibility was Halliburton there at 12. I'll give it a B. I still think for a high risk, high reward pick, it's not bad because realistically, you're not going to have Russell Westbrook there for much longer. Beal's not a long-term guy. You don't see Beal on your next. I don't think Beal's going to be on your next championship-winning team as the Wizards. I mean, maybe if Avdija isn't either, but there's at least a better chance he is. So I'll give it a B. I think that's fair.
Yeah, I think it's fair too. And then for our last one, we have the Suns. They took Jalen Smith at 10. He gave it a C grade. I mean, at that time, I'd probably give a C, C minus, and now it's I'd say F. I mean, he's just been terrible. He's played 25 games, which I mean, you could have asked me how many games he would have played. I'd probably had no clue because I'd never seen him play. When watching Suns games, he's only averaged 40 minutes, 4 minutes per game, 1.5 points. I mean, this was just a bad pick, and like at the time, I mean, they just didn't need him. He's a guy who's not going to do anything. Like offensively, he's not going to bring anything. Defensively, I guess he could bring something. I mean, he's 6'10", he has some length, some athletic ability, but again, you didn't exactly need that on this team. Um, Halliburton was a perfect fit here. Even I'm pretty sure they had Chris Paul at this point, before the draft, but still Halliburton was still, I think, the pick here. Even with Chris Paul, you would have Halliburton, Paul, and Booker. I mean, those three guards, that's if they would have had Halliburton on this team, and again, it worked out. I mean, I guess not really because of the draft pick, more because of Paul and their coaching staff. They're second in the West right now, possibly could be first by the end of the season. But if you had Halliburton, this team could be even way better, which is crazy to think about. But yeah, just a total miss on this pick. He's probably out of the league, in like 2 years, honestly. So yeah, I just think it was a terrible pick.
He looks like a bust. Yeah, definitely. Just he's not getting playing time, and maybe it's because the Suns team's just that good. But they're just. I mean, if he was good enough, he'd find playing time. He was at the time. I would have given it a D, maybe even an F. It's tough to give a grade, a pick at an F off right off the bat. But he was
Yeah.
he was the Alex Leatherwood of the NBA draft. He was the reach. He was the reach guy. You didn't need to pick him in the lottery to get him. I don't think. And if you're gonna reach on a guy like that at pick 10 for the Suns, where Halliburton was right there for the taking, like he was the guy that Halliburton was the guy that could have gone like 5 or 6 too. Like that was your guy, even with or without Paul. That was your guy to pick, and you passed on him for Smith, and Smith's going to be out of the league in the next 5 years, maybe. It's a horrible pick. I give it an F. It was a questionable pick at the time, and it's looking even worse somehow now. So
Yeah, and I'm just looking at the next couple picks in this draft. I mean, we're not going to get into them, but this draft looking right now, based off 1 year, and again, that's not a lot to look at. Obviously, guys can rise after a couple years, takes guys time, but it's looking like a really bad draft so far. There's a couple hits so far, like a LaMelo and Edwards, Halliburton, but obviously you have a quickly in the back end and stuff, but there are not a lot of great picks so far in this draft. Obviously, there's always going to be a couple guys who come up, are going to be, key role players, fringe all-star type level players, but it's looking like a really bad draft so far.
it's looking like a pretty bad draft. And I mean, before this was a draft that people thought was going to be bad too. Like,
Yeah.
because it was all the hype for Zion, it was all the hype for RJ at the time, and people said, like after this, like this next draft's not going to be great. I mean, you have LaMelo, but and you have Wiseman, but and then right after that, Wiseman got injured. Or not injured, but the whole suspended thing, and he didn't end up playing. And LaMelo was not looked at favorably by most, I would say. It wasn't looking like a good draft class. It's not looking like a good one right now, but there's still time. I mean, even some of the guys I didn't like and don't like, I mean, they've showed some promise even from like the Celtics. Like Neesmith is starting to look, like I thought he was going to be a guy that might have been out of the league in 2 years too, and then he probably won't be. Cole Anthony, I think there's going to be some nice picks, but yeah, it's not going to be a great draft class.
Yeah, Neesmith's been really good the last couple of weeks. He's really turned it up for a team that's been completely
Horrible. I mean,
horrible. Yeah, I mean, obviously, Jaylen Brown just got injured. He's out for the year, which is it's tough news. But again, it wouldn't have mattered if he was healthy. They would have lost no matter what, anyways. But yeah, and again, you have like a Tyrese Maxey. Obviously, you have Quickly. Those guys are definitely players. They're definitely real guys who are going to be in the league for a while. They're pretty good guys. But just looking at the draft picks, there's just not a lot of good draft picks. Malachi Flynn, 29 to the Raptors. That was a good pick. He's been pretty good for them. They usually seem to always have really good draft picks. But yeah, that was kind of a recap on the top 10 picks of the draft. It looks like just from the top 10, it looks like, LaMelo, Edwards, so far look like true, they're going to be stars in this league, most likely. Wiseman, he's probably never going to be a star, but he's going to be a really good role player on a really good team. I'd probably say, he's going to be that good center. And then you have, again, a couple of the guys in that top 10 who seem like they could be, pretty good. I guess that's what we'll say. So do you have anything else about the draft before we get into the next one?
No, I'm good to go in the next one. I just reaction to ESPN's article 2021 NBA preview wins and standings projected for all 30 teams. I mean, I don't think we'll do all 30 teams, but
Yeah.
yeah, we'll get into it. You can go first. I guess we'll start with highest average wins.
Should we start in the East or just?
Yeah, start in the East based off highest average wins, I guess.
Yeah. So they had the Bucks.
You're gonna
Average wins.
So yeah, I'll be back.
What was that?
I have to grab my charger, so have fun.
Oh, okay. So they had the Bucks at 44 and a half wins. Again, this is for a 72 game season. Let me look at the standings right now. So there's only about 3 to 4 games left for each team in the league. I think every team has 3 to 4 games left. The Bucks right now are 43 and 25, so they basically hit that head on. Looks like they're going to beat that 44 and a half. They have 4 games left against the Magic, Pacers, Heat, and Bulls. So that's at least 2-2, probably 3-1 for the Bucks. So yeah, I would say they definitely go over that 44 and a half wins that ESPN had them for, and they had them as the number 1 seed, based off the wins, I guess. So it doesn't look like they're going to be the 1 seed, but they could definitely be the 2 seed. Right now, they're the 3 seed behind Brooklyn by 1 game. They do own that tiebreaker, so if they were to tie Brooklyn at the end of the season, they would be the 2 seed. And Philly right now is 47 and 21. We'll get into Philly after, but yeah, I think they hit that, perfectly. 44 and a half wins, or at 43 right now with 4 games left.
Yeah, I guess the only critique would be they're not the 1 seed. But yeah, I mean they nailed it on the head, so it's tough to.
Yeah, it's tough to critique it when they got it perfectly, and there was just 2 teams that just did better than that. I don't see a problem with that in my mind. But the second team they had, which I know you would have agreed with based on our predictions from the before the season started, they had the Toronto Raptors at 43.7 average wins, so let's call it 44. That obviously did not hit. Toronto right now is 27 and 41. So yeah, that obviously didn't hit. Even though they didn't really trade anyone, obviously Lowry is still there. They traded Powell, but they got Trent, which looks like right now they probably won that trade just based off Trent with the years left that he has and the improvement that he's shown. But yeah, 27 and 41. This was just an old team that they kind of just ran out of gas, I'd say, over the last couple of years.
Wheels fell off. Yeah.
Yeah.
Losing Gasol and Surge, not a big deal, but I mean those were hard guys, and if you still had them, maybe you still have a little bit more gas in the tank. But yeah, the wheels fell off. Siakam, talk about a guy who he was on that Jason Tatum level. There was a legitimate conversation. Who would you rather have going forward, Siakam or Tatum? Now there's no doubt in my mind. I'm probably going with Tatum. So yeah. Clearly miss on me too, because I had them as my 2 seed. So
yeah. I don't think people saw them being this bad. I think I had them as the 9-10 seed or something like that, maybe 8 seed for me. Thinking they're still an experienced team. They still have really good coaching staff, but they just ran out of gas, honestly. And them being in Tampa, I think definitely played somewhat of an effect. I mean, you're on the road basically the whole season. You're never actually home, so I think that also played somewhat of an effect. But so that was for the 2nd seed. I guess we'll just do the playoff teams. That's probably the easiest one. And then if there's a surprising team, we'll do that. But for number 3, they had the Celtics at 40.2, so we'll call it 40. Right now, the Celtics are 35 and 33, and they have 4 games left against the Heat, Cavs, Timberwolves, and Knicks. So obviously, they're not going to be able to get to 40. And again, this is a lost season for the Celtics. Like I just said, they lost Brown for the season now. So I guess you're a Celtic fan. I mean, you thought they'd at least have 40 wins, but I guess what are your thoughts about the Celtics?
I thought they'd be competing for a solid seed in the East. Clearly not the case. Walker out the gate, I mean, injured and then just not as good as people thought. Brown and Tatum, I think they took steps. I think they were as good as I thought they'd be. So I think I was right on them, but the rest of the team I just wasn't right on. Losing Hayward was clearly huge. That's a guy that they would really love to have right now. The chemistry's not there. Stevens is a guy that you're not going to fire Stevens, but if he doesn't learn how to get this locker room together, and I think that's his weakness is he's a good X's and O's guy. He's going to be able to do a lot with a little bit. You give him a little bit of butter, he'll butter up like a whole loaf of, toast, but you give him talent. I don't know. He hasn't been able to do it. And, Kyrie's gone. So there's not too many hotheads, but the chemistry is not there. You have to make some moves, I think, definitely. The trade deadline moves the Celtics made in this trade deadline, I didn't really like. I mean, Wagner got cut.
Fournier had COVID, which
Fournier.
I mean, that's tough. That's tough.
But Fournier wasn't even looking great off the bat either. He was a guy that, you looked at and you said, okay, if he does well and this team can actually manage to turn around and go deep, he's a guy you may look to re-sign. I would not have, been in favor for it, even if he had played well. But yeah, it's tough. I was never, and once this Celtics team kind of started to dip, I wasn't a big fan of them. So I kind of knew I was wrong. There was a moment where they went on a solid streak, but all those wins were close. They were against good, not great teams like Warriors, Trailblazers. I think they beat the Lakers without LeBron and AD, like barely or something, maybe just without LeBron. But yeah, just disappointment. We'll have to see what happens next year. But Ainge has to start doing something, or Ainge is on the hot seat to me as a GM.
Yeah, and I think I read a stat that said they were down 20 points plus in 13 of their, I guess they played 68 games so far. I mean, that's 13 out of 68 for a team that, even no matter what you say about them, they're clearly a really talented team, and based off their talent should be a top four or five seed in the East. To be down 13 times by 20 plus points in a season in 68 games, I mean, that's awful. That's terrible. That's like at that point you're a team that's way below 500, and you're like a Bulls, Orlando, Cleveland at that point. So
Yeah.
it's just been a multitude of problems for them. Obviously injuries, coaching, locker room, whatever, just dysfunction everywhere. So clearly something's wrong with that team, as we know, obviously. And yeah, there'd be a lot of off-season, acquisitions. That's what I was looking for that team, and a lot of they're going to blow that team up a little bit. But at the 4 seed, or at least the fourth team, I guess it is the 4th seed. They had the Miami Heat at 39.9. So again, we'll call that 40. Miami right now is 37 and 31. So, and they have the Celtics, Sixers, Bucks, and Pistons. So actually 3 pretty tough teams left to play. I guess the Celtics maybe aren't as much. But yeah, it looks like they'll at least get to 39. So yeah, I would say that's a pretty good placement by ESPN to put them at 39.9. And they were a team that clearly I think was tired from the bubble run, that finals run from last year. I think they were definitely hungover, as people would say, from getting to that finals. But they've clicked it the last couple weeks. Butler's played phenomenal since he's been back from his injury. I think he's 22, 7 and 7 over his last 30 games, which is and really efficient, which is that's peak Butler right there. So this is definitely a team you do not want to see in the playoffs. And Milwaukee right now, they face Milwaukee in the playoffs, and I think that'd be a really tough matchup for Milwaukee. If Milwaukee wins, I think it'd be like a 7-game series, and it'd be a complete battle between those two teams. So Miami's definitely a team I do not want to see.
Miami's a team, yeah, you don't want to see them in the playoffs. I think they might have gotten the result right with the Heat's win total, but the path they took, I don't know that they necessarily would have predicted that. Looking back on I think looking at Hero as a guy that I think this team could be potentially even better if you had managed to capitalize on Hero's value. I think the Heat thought he's a guy that will take a trajectory not similar play style to Jaylen Brown, but a guy that takes a big leap and is able to be an all-star caliber player. And I just don't think he's that. I don't think he'll ever be that, to be honest. So I think he's closer to Duncan Robinson than he is to, I don't know, who would he compare to? What's a better version of Tyler Hero? I don't know, combine some version of Trae Young and Jason. I don't know. Just he's closer to Duncan Robinson than he is to a 90 overall all NBA second or third team guy, or even an all-star. I think he probably could have traded him and maximized his value. I don't think he's going to get a better value than what he had coming out of that bubble last year. And to me, that's a mistake, but this team's still a team you don't want to see in the playoffs. A team led by Jimmy Butler is almost never a team you want to see. So yeah, I mean, they're gonna be a tough team,
Yeah,
especially the Bucks, because I mean we know what happened. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, that'd be the worst case scenario for the Bucks. So I think the Bucks would definitely be looking to get that 2 seed so they avoid Miami in that first round. But um, at 5, then this is probably pretty surprising at the time. I feel like at the time, I think people had, again, for 5, they had the Sixers. They had them at 39.4. I think at the time when they made this, I like the Sixers. I think getting Doc Rivers, I think just a coaching change is what they needed to become just a better team. And no matter what their record was with Brett Brown, they just weren't a good team. So just getting Doc Rivers, obviously getting that Seth Curry trade for Josh Richardson, that was a great trade. Simmons, he hasn't improved offensively, but he's probably Defensive Player of the Year. And obviously Embiid, if he didn't get injured, he's MVP. Even with no matter what Jokic was doing, if Embiid never got injured, he was most likely going to be MVP. So yeah, they're right now they're 47-21. They're going to be the number 1 seed in the East. So yeah, this I wouldn't say they missed on them being 39.5, but I think they're pretty low on them. I think for the changes that they made in the offseason.
yeah, I think the Seth Curry trade was a home run for them. It was to me, I looked at it as kind of just like a meh, like cool. Maybe Seth's better, maybe he's not better. They're a little bit different players, but they play the same position at least. Who knows what happens there? It was a clear home run. I was always, even 3 years ago or whatever, I was always just fire Brett Brown. He's horrible. He's so dumb. He lost in all those series against the Celtics. Like I just remember just thinking like, if you had traded head coaches, if the Celtics had Brett Brown and the Sixers had Brad Stevens in a lot of those old series, like the Celtics probably don't win those series, and they were winning those series like 5. Brett Brown was horrible. Doc Rivers, and I don't love Doc Rivers. I think he's probably overrated as a coach in general, but at least legacy wise, he's done a great job. This is I never expected them to be the 1 seed. Well, not never, but I did not expect them to be the 1 seed. I expected them to be in that 4 through 2 range. So yeah, it's yeah, they've done well. It'll be interesting to see Milwaukee, the 76ers, and the Nets. Those are the clear top 3 teams. I want to see some fights. I want to see the Sixers play the Nets, honestly. And then I'd like to see the Bucks get one of those 2 as well. It'll be interesting to see in the playoffs because those are the 3 teams in the East. It's not really close.
Yeah, the Sixers right now, I think you could probably pencil them in for an Eastern Conference finals appearance at least, because I mean they don't have to face Brooklyn or Milwaukee, and they most likely don't have to face Miami. I mean, you're facing the Knicks or the Hawks, and that looks like a pretty clear win in the second round for them. So right now, I'd have them in my Eastern Conference Finals, at the minimum, obviously. So yeah, they're in a perfect position right now for the playoffs. But at 6, they had the Nets, and obviously, this changed when they traded for James Harden, but they had them at 39.9. So again, we'll call it 39 wins. Right now, they're at 44. And even though Harden's been injured, Kyrie's left the team, KD's been injured, they've had so much stuff. They're still 44-24. It does look like they'll be the 2 seed again. They're only a game up on Milwaukee, but they don't own the tiebreaker. But they play the Bulls, Spurs, Cavs. I mean, that's a pretty easy Final 4 games. So yeah, again, this is one where if they don't have Harden, they're probably are at 40 wins, maybe just right now, maybe for the end of the season. But with Harden, you're obviously going to get a couple more wins. And yeah, this is just a really good team. So not much to say, honestly.
Yeah, I think this is kind of around where I probably had them a bit lower in my predictions, but I think they were going to be a top team regardless, and especially after adding Harden. I mean, that's the offense there is insane. We'll see what happens in the playoffs. I mean, if you've listened, I'm probably lower on them than most, and Brandon's about where most people are on the Nets, if not maybe slightly higher. But yeah, I guess Pacers at 7. I mean, I don't know.
Well, yeah, I mean, they had them as the same as the Nets. I think that even going into the season, I think that was ridiculous, honestly. I think the Nets were just clearly a better team, obviously without Harden, than the Pacers were going into the year. They had so many questions. I mean, Oladipo, Turner, new head coach, which looks like he may even get fired, honestly, after this season. He's had so many locker room issues, and the team's obviously underperformed. Obviously, Oladipo got traded. Turner's now been injured. Brogdon's been injured. Sabonis has been amazing. I mean, he's one of the most underrated players in the NBA. Levert's been pretty good since he got there, but even since he's got there and started playing after the kidney situation, it hasn't exactly gelled with the team. Because before he started playing there and after that trade, they were playing pretty well, but then as soon as he came back, they started slowing down again. So, I mean, right now they're 32-36. It looks like they'll be the 9-10 seed. Washington owns that tiebreaker over them. But again, I think I had them as my 9 seed or 8 seed when we did our predictions. And yeah, I think most people probably had them there. So for them to have, for ESPN to put them at 39 wins, and again, I guess that's a 7 seed they had them at, but I still thought 39 wins is too much for that team.
I had them around my 7 seed. They got off to a really nice start, and it was a team that I said, "Wow, are they going to really get a 5 seed here? Like they might be able to have like a 5 seed." Clearly, they just started falling off. Injuries. The head coach, Bjorkton,
Bjorkson.
he just hasn't been good. He's probably going to get fired, like you said. So yeah, they got off to a hot start, falling off. I mean, I expect them to probably lose in the play-in tournament. If you held a gun in my head and said, do they get into the playoffs? I say probably not. So
yeah, I'd probably say the same thing too, especially if they play Washington or then I guess Charlotte, maybe even Boston if Boston loses to Charlotte or whatever. So yeah, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. But this 8th team that they have, they had the Hawks at 36. I mean, right now the Hawks are 38-31. So again, they obviously cleared 36. I really wasn't that high on the Hawks. I thought, they added so many pieces, Bogdanovich, Gallinari, I guess a Okongwu in the draft. I mean, you get another year of Reddish, who's been injured. Another year of Hunter, also has been injured. He just came back. But Hunter's really improved the second year, not so much in Reddish. You just had, you got Rondo, you traded him again. That was kind of a weird signing anyways. But they've been a lot better than I expected. And that really has to do with the coaching change. I mean, firing Lloyd Pierce, ever since then, they've been, I think they're like at least 12 games over 500 since that firing. So clearly Nate McMillan was like that. I don't know if that was the spark, and I guess it was, but I just think Trae Young's been a lot better than I expected. He's not the 30-point per game scorer who takes 35-foot threes anymore. He's the 25-point per game scorer who's getting others involved, which is kind of the problem with that team, is that everyone said that Young just never passed the ball. Even though he may average 9 assists a game, he's not really passing to other guys. So yeah, they've been a lot better than I expected.
yeah, they're better than I expected too. I might have had them in the plan, might not have, but I mean they're better than that. If they match the Knicks in the first round of the playoffs, I'd probably go with the Hawks. I know others may not, you may not, but I'd probably go with the Hawks if they match up first round. They've been a lot better than I expected. They've missed on some draft picks. Like I think Reddish is probably just a miss at this point, but Hunter's rebounded. He was looking like a guy who might have been a bust too. He's at least not a bust yet. Yeah, I mean, we talked about a Kongwu, but this team's solid. They're a solid team, and they have the potential to beat the Knicks and get into the second round of the playoffs, which is much more than anybody thought they were doing, even the 5 Atlanta fans.
Yeah. No, they're a scary team. Their offense is, I mean, they really shoot the three. They also really make their free throws. I think they have the highest free throw percentage in the league. Maybe the Clippers do, each other 1 or 2. But yeah, they're a scary team offensively, and obviously defense against the Knicks team. I think they'd win. Against a true offensive team, I think they'd really struggle. But yeah, they're definitely, that first round is going to be very interesting between them and the Knicks. And then speaking of the Knicks, this will be the last team for the East. They had them at 24.7, so again, we'll call it 25. 2% chance to make the playoffs. Right now, the Knicks are 38-30. I don't think anyone expected this. I think we were both on the same page as ESPN. That I think I had them as I guess we didn't even do past the 10 seed, but they would have been 12, 13 seed. So for them to be where they are now, it's truly amazing. Thibodeau probably should get Coach of the Year, but he still may. But I think it's probably Monty Williams of the Suns. I think in the West to be the 2 seed, possibly even the 1 seed. I think that's probably just greater. But yeah, any other year he would get Coach of the Year.
Yeah, they've been super surprising. They had ESPN gave them a 2% chance of making the playoffs, and they gave Toronto a 98% chance.
Yeah.
So they've been a big surprise. I guess getting quickly in the draft was huge, and even huger, making somehow Randall just turned in from a guy who was like, a guy who an NBA journeyman at best into now a guy who's might be a perennial all-star for the next 5 or so years. I mean, I've never really seen it. Like, You just don't see guys like that who have been in the league for as long as he has. He's been in the league for as long as Smart has. So it's
Yeah.
like the equivalent of Smart going from what he was to like, a defensive player of the year as a guard type of guy. Like you just don't see that. So it was crazy. It was crazy. They're a lot better. Who knows how far they go. Their ceiling is probably the second round of the playoffs. So, but still, I mean, that's so much better than you thought. Thibodeau was a guy who, after he got fired from the Bulls, like he was a guy that you just thought, and he went to, the Timberwolves. He just was a guy you thought, he's just what happened to Thibodeau. He was a guy that you thought he was a S tier head coach, like a top 5 head coach, head coach, and just he kind of fell off. But now he's looking great. This next team has promise. We'll see what happens. They need to get talent next. They need true talent. Even on a championship team, Randall's probably a 3 at best. So you're still going to need talent, but they're the Knicks. If they can get it, they'll get it. At least I think so.
Yeah, this is exactly what the Knicks needed, to prove to the league that they're a competent organization and competent team. And now you'd hope free agents would actually want to come to the Knicks. So yeah, this is exactly the year that they need it. And yeah, I think it's worked out. I mean, perfectly. It's just, I mean, coaching wise, player wise, front office wise, exactly everything that they needed. But moving over to the West, they had the Lakers at number 1, 44.3. So again, we'll call it 44. I mean, obviously they're 30 right now, but Anthony Davis is injured for 30 games. LeBron's injured for 20 plus games. I mean, you can't expect that to happen. I guess maybe AD can just injury prone, but again, obviously not LeBron. But I don't think. I mean, neither of us had them as the 1 seed in the West based off last season in the bubble, playing so late, starting so early this season. But we still had them as a top team. But again, if those guys aren't injured, they're a top 3 seed. They're a top 3 team in the West. So it's you kind of take it with a grain of salt, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I was probably, we were both lower on the Lakers regular season wise than ESPN is, but yeah, I think they pretty much got it right. So yeah, if they don't get injured, they're around that 44 win mark. Now, I think you could easily predict AD and LeBron. I mean, he'd been injured 2 years prior, or I guess, 2 years prior, and he's a guy that's 36 years old. I think you could still definitely predict that. So I don't want to say they nailed it on the head, but they are pretty close. And the Lakers should probably they'll contend. I mean, who knows what happens with the whole plan to, we'll see, but they're still, they might even be the favorites still. I don't know about them being the favorites, but they're still in that top 5 teams conversation. And if the Lakers won the finals, I would not be surprised at all. So
yeah, and LeBron's going to come back. He was going to come back today, but I think he's coming back against the Rockets. I guess that's in 2 days, maybe even tomorrow. So yeah, as long as I think they have like 3 games left, as long as he just shows that he's still at least 90%. Him and AD and that team definitely are, if not the favorite, the second favorite coming out of the West. But moving on to the second seed, they had the Clippers 41.7. So again, we'll call it 42. Clippers are now 45-23. So yeah, I mean, they basically got it, I'd say. I mean, the Clippers have definitely been, I think they've been better, but then also the same as last year. It's kind of weird how they've been, they've seems like at times they've been a better team. I think Paul George has been better this season. Kawhi has kind of been the same. He hasn't exactly been spectacular this season. Obviously, I think he's probably saving that for the playoffs, which I'd assume he would be amazing in the playoffs. But we'll see about Paul George. But I think the Rondo trade was huge for them. They've been a lot better since that. But yeah, I think they kind of got it right with them. I think they were they had them 43 or 42. They're at 45. So yeah, I think it was pretty much right.
yeah, I think they pretty much got it right. Rondo trade big. We'll see how Tyronn Lue. We'll see what difference that makes between him and Doc in the playoffs. I'm excited for it. This is a team that when we do our playoff predictions, I may pick them to win it all. So we'll see. But yeah, I think they pretty much got it right.
Yeah, and the 3 seed they had, this is obviously the worst one, I guess. Them and the Raptors, but clearly this one, they had the Rockets as the 3 with average wins of 41. I mean, obviously that's not going to happen. The Rockets right now are 16-53. This was obviously, but they did this before James Harden got traded. I think they even did this before Westbrook got traded too. So that's why they had him as the 3 seed. But I think we knew Westbrook was going to get traded, and then Harden. I think you hoped you could keep to him, but he soured that situation completely on his own. So you had to trade him. And even I had them as my 5 seed in the West before the season started, knowing that Westbrook wasn't there, but I was still hoping, not even hoping, I was still thinking that Harden was going to be there. But yeah, that obviously didn't happen. They clearly tanked the season because if their picks out of the top three, then it goes to the Thunder. So they're trying, I think, or top four, top five, whatever it is. So yeah, they're tanking for that top three pick, so they can get Cade, Kaminga, Johnson, whoever it is they get. So yeah.
Yeah, I was never high on the Rockets going into the season. I knew that I just never Harden's attitude. I knew he wasn't going to want to go back to that team. Really, we knew Westbrook was gone. I didn't think Harden was going to stay, and your prediction was kind of reliant. It was obviously reliant on Harden staying.
Yeah.
I think you might have thought Harden was going to stay. I kind of thought Harden was probably gone. Harden ended up leaving, so their state really isn't too surprising right now to anybody. But yeah, I mean, ESPN having them as the 3 seed, it's I wouldn't do that. I would never have that.
Yeah, I would say, considering they still had Westbrook and Harden at that time, I think it's definitely a better pick than a Raptors pick, where that was the team. Like the team is what it is now is what it
Yeah.
was then. You know what I'm saying? So I think it gets technically a better pick, but yeah, it's obviously a bad pick. The Jazz at 4, they had them at 41 wins. Right now they're at 50 wins, so they're basically 10 games better than that. The number 1 seed in the West. It looks like they'll probably hold on to that. They're up 1.5 games on the Suns. Yeah, this was definitely a team that I'd say, I don't even know, I guess overachieved. I mean, they went in that stretch where they were like, what, 24-2 or something like that, a couple, like 2 months ago. So yeah, I think they're a team that is built for the regular season, but not the playoffs.
They might not be right on the win total and the seeding, but they might end up being right on the actual playoff result of the Jazz, which is probably second round and
Yeah.
gone. I just did they do anything? Are they any different than they were last year? My answer is no. I mean, they went to 7 with the Nuggets. They gave up a 3-1 lead, but so that was a 7-game series with the Nuggets. I think they're probably still around that same kind of place. I think if they were in a series with the Nuggets for some reason, that it would probably go 7, and I think it'd be pretty close. And I don't think they're really different other than the fact they went like 24-2, and they're just a really solid regular season team, not much injury. So yeah, Quinn Snyder. If I didn't say Quinn Snyder, he's a great coach. He's a guy that if he had the narrative of Monty Williams or the narrative or city that Thibodeau has, he's a guy that could easily win Coach of the Year too. He's not, but
Yeah, definitely. But yeah, I think they had what you were saying with the playoffs. Yeah, they're probably second round. I think they'd lose to Dallas or Denver, is who they'd play right now in the second round. So yeah, even though the wins may be wrong, I think the result is going to be correct in that they'll end up losing in that second round. But the next team, speaking of Denver, is the Nuggets. They aim at 40 wins. Right now they're at 44. I think 40 wins is probably. I mean, I guess that's the 5 seed for them.
that's
They're
pretty
the
low.
4 seed right now, but I think that was pretty low. I mean, no, I don't think people expected the Suns and Jazz to be the 1 and 2 seed. I obviously expected the Lakers to be up there, but I think people had the Nuggets in that 1 through 3 seed. And obviously, I don't think 40 wins would have been 1 through 3. I mean, clearly it isn't. That would be the 5 or 6 seed right now. So, and there's still a couple of games left, but obviously they don't have Murray. He's out for the year, but Jokic is MVP and he's been amazing. And their team's been better since Murray got injured, which is kind of crazy to think about. But yeah, I think 40 wins was too low at the beginning of the season, anyways. You're muted. You're muted.
Sorry. Somebody's mowing the lawn in the background, so I'm trying to go on like push talk. But what was I saying? Yeah, I think 40 wins is super low, especially considering it's you're assuming a healthy Jamal Murray. That's not what we got, so that's super low, super low.
Yeah. And I guess we'll wrap the last couple of teams, try to do a little quicker. Mavs at 6. They aim at 40 right now. They're at 40 wins again. That's pretty spot on. And yeah, I mean they've had a lot of trouble beginning of the season. Luka was out of shape. They had some rotation inconsistencies. I guess we'll say the Curry trade. They definitely lost that trade. And getting Richardson, Porzingis, that's a question, obviously. But lately they've been a lot better lately. So if they were playing like this the whole year, I think they'd blow 40 wins out of the water. But yeah, I guess so far it's worked out. 40 wins. ESPN got that pretty much spot on.
Yeah, I think they pretty much got it right. I think we were both higher on the Mavs than ESPN was, and looking at their recent play, maybe you can say we're going to be right. We'll see. I think I might have had them as like a 2 or 3 seed. I think I might have them as a 2 seed, maybe the 3.
I had them as a 4 seed.
I might have them as 4. I might have them even 2 or 3. But yeah, I was super high on this team. I think we both had Doncic as MVP. I'd have to check. We're gonna probably do that in a future episode, but look back at that. But yeah, yeah.
And this at 7 they had the Pelicans. They had 39 wins. That I thought that was way too high at the beginning of the season. I think I had the Pelicans as my 10 seed, maybe even 9 seed, in our predictions for the season. I never thought that team was a good team. Obviously, you have Zion and Ingram. Obviously, Zion being the number one player on that team, but getting Van Gundy in the offseason, I don't think that was a good hire. It clearly isn't a good hire. He may even be fired after the season. Maybe they give him next season, but I think he gets fired at some point in the near future. Obviously, Zion's now out for the year, but again, that team was never working. They don't play defense, and their offense should just be through Zion, but for some reason it isn't. So yeah, I thought that was just way too high to begin with.
Yeah, agreed.
And I guess just to state it, they're 31-38, and they're going to miss the playoffs, most likely. I mean, they're 2.5 games out of the 10 seed, so they're probably missing it. And at 8, they had the Suns at 38.5 wins. Suns right now with 48, so clearly they blew that out. But I had them I think I had them as my 9 seed, maybe 8 seed. And I think that's where most
ESPN had them, basically.
Yeah, I think that's where most people had them, was right there, because I don't think people saw them being this good, and I think the 8 seed or 7 seed was like a perfect seed for them.
I would agree. I mean, they clearly just blew it out of the water. Chris Paul is a huge reason for that. And as much as credit as Chris Paul gets, don't forget there's also other players in the Suns. Obviously, everybody knows Devin Booker, but Mikal Bridges, DeAndre Ayton. There are players on that team that are contributing to the reason they're a 2 seed. It's not just Chris Paul. Even though Chris Paul clearly he's the guy on that team. He's the heart and soul. He's the reason that they're able to be a winning culture. So yeah, they blew everybody out of the water with that. Crazy. Probably maybe the biggest surprise of the year. It's at least up there. So
yeah, definitely one of the top 3 surprises of the year. But the last team we'll do in the West, they had the Warriors at 14. I thought that was 14 in the West when you had the Timberwolves and the Thunder, and obviously we know about the Rockets, but even just Timberwolves and Thunder, I thought that was way too low. They had them at 31 wins. Right now they're at 36. I think people maybe forgot how good Curry was. Obviously the rest of that team hasn't played well, but I thought that was just way too low to begin with. I think if you have a team with Curry like that, you're going to at least be over 500, which is what they are. They're 36-33. They're at least going to end up 500. So yeah, I thought that was way too low.
Yeah, I agreed. 14 super low. They also have the Spurs at 13 in the West. I mean, I think people just, I guess, forgot how good Popovich is. I mean, that team has really no talent. They're really not good. I mean, they're definitely not good, but
Yeah.
13 is a little bit low. If it's noteworthy, it's not as bad as the Warriors at 14 in my mind, but yeah,
Yeah, so that wraps it up on that, and also for this episode. But for the next episode, we're going to look back at what we predicted at the beginning of the season. So the awards and the standings. We kind of did the standings there, but we didn't give our predictions on it. So again, that we'll kind of do a quick recap of that, and we'll show our standings, then go over our awards, and then we'll predict the seedings for the playoffs, who gets in the play-in tournament, and then who actually makes the playoffs from the play-in tournament. So that'll be all next episode, when there will probably most likely be 1 or 2 games left for every single team. So yeah, we'll basically know, right after that episode what the seedings will be. So do you have anything else?
Appreciate everyone who stayed to the end. Feel free to look at the description. YouTube, the Clips channel should see some new content in the near future. So stay tuned for that. Make sure to do that notification bell on that channel, so if I post anything, you'll see it. So yeah, but that's it. Appreciate everybody stay to the end. So goodbye. We will be back in a couple days, 2 or 3.